an animal for its taste is a bigger harm to the animal than it for pleasure would be. Well, we know this isn't true because animals who are don't become suicidal. Sure, some dogs who are traumatized by owners might stop accepting food from other people, but this is because of fear and lack of trust in people.
We can agree with
so
that.
you believe that it cannot be a sexuality. You believe that it cannot be
No,
innate
it's
for
no.
every single person.
If you want me to be very real, it's not a sexuality. It is quite.
I believe it can be.
That's okay. Then
I'm trying to calm down, Mom, but you're not. I'm trying to be famous.
Dansburst, we can't talk to you when you keep on doing this. I don't know why you're doing this.
I'm doing this because my mother is in the room with me right now, and she's not letting me film my video.
That voice belongs to 21-year-old Herbert Kenneth Wichaka, better known as Timmy, or by his pony persona, Dansburst. He's a Brony, which is a term for a grown-up or teenage male fan of the animated series My Little Pony.
My little pony, all in a twinkling, spring is here. My little pony.
And he keeps using the word axiom to feel smart.
And I agree with the consent axiom applied to humans. I'm telling you the result of the deductions of my moral axioms, but I haven't told you the axioms that I'm starting from. So can I tell you the axioms that I'm starting from? First, we can talk about what axioms we should be starting from, then we can talk about what we can deduce from those axioms.
But Dansburst isn't just a delusional intellectual, he's dangerous. And this is a self-diagnosed autistic man who has argued that 5-year-old kids can consent to
I believe it's severely and very improbable that a 5-year-old is going to give their free expression of indication of desire in regarding an act.
This is also a man who has no issues throwing the word around like ping pong ball, like in this thread, where Dansburst essentially tweeted, "Can I you?" before responding that he doesn't date blacks, not even the ones. Here's another horrible revelation. Dansburst is a hardcore pedophile apologist and defender. He believes that punishment for pedophiles is nothing but a political agenda and a ruthless, senseless violence against people who question and technically go by their own rules of consent. And as if that isn't nauseating enough, he also defends in long YouTube videos full of half-witted garbage. Dansburst refers to children as foals, which is a term for young horses, and he openly bragged about having a foal harem, also known as orgy for kids, in a magical My Little Pony land called Equestria, where there are no age of consent laws. This Brony is so infamous that he managed to get himself banned from both Ponytown and Kiwi Farms, two places where you really have to try to get kicked out. As of today, Dansburst is a ghost on the internet because he deleted everything related to his name and disgusting philosophies back in 2024. However, traces of his degeneracy are still polluting the web space.
I don't think there's anything wrong with consuming content that glorifies or simulates murder or... These things don't cause harm in the real world, and I don't think that they should be outlawed.
Who is this deranged guy, and what did he do to get kicked off the internet? Stick around as unravel the sick clown called Dansburst layer by layer.
You are. This is why I'm never gonna be with you again. I'm gonna break up with you, and you're never gonna see me again. I'm gonna myself, Michael, and you will be the one. You will pay.
To start off, let's talk about what Dansburst called his intellectual magnum opus, a YouTube video titled Dansburst Debunks, The Immorality of Zoo. It was 25 minutes long and was uploaded on August 7th, 2024. The thumbnail itself should have gotten Dansburst in deep legal hot water because it featured My Little Pony characters in suggestive positions with animals. For Dansburst, this was a legitimate academic discourse. His argument was centered around 2 points, zoo being wrong and zoo being illegal.
I'm going to be arguing against 2 separate but related claims. First, that zoo is morally wrong, and next, that zoo should be illegal. Well, let's start with the first.
The video was a response to a furry artist named Tibbles, who had the reasonable opinion that defending zoo makes you a bad person.
This is going to be the first of 2 videos responding to Tibbles Yorkie, the canine. This video was a long time in the making. I started it like a month ago, at first as a response to her role in the El Money drama. But after I looked more into Tibbles, I saw a number of social media posts where she platforms herself as one of the activists in the latest wave of the dogmatic crusade against his view.
Dansburst, being the brave intellectual warrior he is, tried to debate Tibbles on this topic and quickly got blocked because, you know, normal people wouldn't think to debate whether animal is ethical. Most people would have accepted defeat and moved on, but Dansburst didn't let it go. He needed the world to hear his arguments, so he spent weeks crafting his 25-minute manifesto. Dansburst's first unsettling argument is this: if you're willing to eat animals, you should also be willing to have with them, because apparently in Dansburst's mind, these 2 things are morally equivalent.
A lot of anti-zoo think that an animal is morally wrong and makes you a bad person. And people have, of course, asked them, why is that any different than eating an animal?
This type of argument was exactly what you'd expect from someone who spends their days role-playing as a cartoon horse. Dansburst literally compared eating meat of animals, suggesting that if you're fine with one, you should be fine with the other. And this sadistic opening was only the beginning, as Dansburst continued to spit more of his intellectual drivel. He claimed that humans still hunt and eat animals despite having an abundance of tofu. And this behavior was enough proof for him that zoophilia is not immoral.
The anti-zoo reply that we have to eat animals for nutrition, and even if we didn't, vegan stuff would be more expensive. But what if this weren't true? Here's my main claim. Even if all humans had readily available 100% nutritious bland tofu, it wouldn't be wrong or immoral for a human to hunt and ostrich, either because they like the taste of its meat or because they enjoy the thrill of the hunt. It turns out that this is all we need to deduce that zoophilia is not immoral.
His logic is so painfully dense that you could have a migraine trying to understand him. But here's a breakdown of the message Dansburst was trying to pass across. He's essentially arguing that because humans are omnivores who eat meat, and because we place human desires above animal welfare when it comes to food, and then we should also place human desires above animal welfare. Here's an illustration that might help. If humans still hunt animals despite having an abundance of spinach, it means that humans still value their desire to eat meat. And in a similar way, this selfish law could also apply to humans with desires towards animals. Going by this logic, Dansburst was basically saying that craving hot dogs was on the same moral compass as a dog. In fact, it got to a point where he straight up claimed that animals was much worse than them.
We know it's fine to eat an ostrich to taste its meat or for the thrill of the hunt. This means it's not immoral to prioritize frivolous human taste or hunt pleasure over an animal's life. Eating an animal for its taste is a bigger harm to the animal than eating it for pleasure would be.
Dansburst reasoned that animals that are don't become suicidal. This is what passes for philosophical reasoning in Dansburst's world.
Some say that non-mutilated would somehow traumatize an animal so much that it would be worse than killing them. We know this isn't true, because animals who don't become suicidal.
He completely dismissed the concept of animal consent entirely, arguing that since animals can't verbally communicate, we can never truly know if they're being emotionally. To prove his nonsensical point, Dansburst had to use a traumatized dog as an example, stating that although such a dog might refuse to accept food from its assailants, it would still eat the food when left alone. For Dansburst, this inherently meant that the dog wasn't hurt emotionally.
Sure, some dogs who are traumatized by owners might stop accepting food from other people, but this is because of fear and lack of trust in people. If you leave food in an empty room with them, they're gonna eat it, instead of starving themselves.
Dansburst continued to argue that all animals value reproduction over their own lives, and would therefore not feel a sense of depression.
All non-human species value reproduction first, then life, and then avoiding pain, in that order and without exception. Barring self-sacrifice to save their young, there hasn't been a single documented case of pet animals or wild animals committing suicide, especially not due to something like depression.
The take-home from Dansburst's 25-minute-long rambles is that animals are really dense creatures that humans could derive pleasure from. This pleasure could be, firstly, in the form of taste, which humans can obtain from the thrill of hunts or the animal's meat, or secondly, from pleasure. However, there's a huge flaw in this argument. Animals are also emotional beings. They feel depressed and can also be pushed to make life-threatening choices. A researcher named Gernot Wieland, who had written works on psychological conditions in society and human beings, spoke largely on this topic at a TEDx conference in 2016. Wieland used the story of a depressed zebra to prove this point. According to Wieland, this zebra had attempted to escape from a zoo multiple times. It eventually succeeded one last time. However, during its transport back to its enclosure, the zebra jumped out of the moving truck and broke its neck. Experts considered this self-destructive behavior as evidence of suicide. Other than that, animals also behave rashly when pushed by a number of mental and emotional factors. We have dogs whining and crying due to separation and anxiety, and animals that never forget a face, especially when humans have either been kind or wicked to them. An example are elephants. They can hold a grudge against you even beyond death. There was a popular case in India in 2022 when an elephant killed a 70-year-old woman and still returned to trample on her corpse at her funeral. The elephant was on a mission to attack that woman, not anyone else. It's unclear what had sparked the bad blood between them, but one thing's for sure. The elephant was upset with the woman. All these factors eventually point to one conclusion. Animals are just the emotional beings as humans, and shouldn't be made to live with the trauma that comes with Unfortunately, this wasn't Dansburst's driving point. He believed that as long as the animal doesn't literally commit suicide, wasn't that bad. This is a real argument a real person made, in a real video that they uploaded to YouTube and were proud of. Dansburst even sunk lower in his debate by ushering in the topic of spirituality. According to him, placing animals' will over that of humans was contradicting God's set laws that humans commanded the earth.
Speaking in spiritual terms, God made a natural hierarchy of all living things: bacteria, plants, invertebrates, vertebrates, non-human mammals, humans, angels, and God. To place an animal's will before a human's will in any moral consideration is to debase God's vision of humans as the natural rulers of Earth.
So not only is animals okay according to Dansburst, but it's actually an insult to God not to them, because it means you're not properly exercising your dominion over the natural world. As if twisting religious doctrines wasn't disgusting enough, he doubled down by stating that anti-zoophilia advocates would naturally refute his arguments on grounds of emotional cruelty. And if that were to be the case, Dansburst stated that emotional cruelty should only factor into the consequences of the actions, and not morals.
These people would say that because satisfying the desire in this case is more cruel, it should be given less weight. I don't think emotional cruelty should factor into morality assessments at all, only the consequences of the actions.
This is particularly rich coming from a guy who constantly accuses his critics of being too emotional and not logical enough. But when it's convenient for his argument, suddenly consequences are all that matter, and the psychological trauma inflicted on a living creature is irrelevant. Throughout the video, Dansburst uses standard pseudo-intellectual vocabulary such as axioms and logical deductions to dress up his justification of animal abuse. To the surprise of no one in particular, the video was not well received. The like-to-dislike ratio was devastating. Over 80 poor viewers who had to endure Dansburst's nonsensical arguments gave it a thumbs down, while 17 morally conflicted people liked it. Regardless of the undeniably sad thumb-ups Dansburst received, the comments were largely against his favor. This is disgusting. Animals can't consent. It was glaringly obvious that his video was perceived as a junkyard, but did Dansburst take this as a sign that his arguments were made of horseshit? Of course not. Instead of deleting it like a normal human being, he doubled down and started responding to comments. First, he mentioned a commenter for disagreeing on the topic of animal consent. In his words, it's irrelevant to morality assessments whether they can consent or not. If I would be Zoph, because you are a mindless parrot, but you're not my type. Then in another breath, he indirectly called everyone who disagreed with him conformists. I'd rather be a weirdo than a conformist. I'm not afraid to speak up when I detect inconsistencies in society's implicit mora axioms. Dansburst's words were sending a message of superiority, as if he was declaring that he wasn't wrong and people misunderstood him because he was more enlightened than them. His case eventually descended further down into the wells of stupidity, when he later engaged in a hot debate on the same topic with another YouTuber named Hunter Avalone. Hunter is a lolcow and political commentator on YouTuber who had come across Dansburst the Lunatic Zoophilia video and decided to platform him for a debate. The event took place on August 22nd, 2024. Dansburst brought his usual encyclopedia of their deranged philosophies, as well as the confidence of a man who would walk around in yellow pencil jeans.
Hello. Hunter, hi. So, let me lay out my main argument. Basically, moral axioms. Vosh is a consequentialist. I want to know how you describe yourself.
Meanwhile, Hunter came prepared with actual moral philosophy, actual logical frameworks, and, most importantly, the basic human instinct that tells you animals is wrong. He wasn't the sharpest tool in the toolbox, but he still managed to floor Dansburst in the debate. As usual, Dansburst opened the floor by asking Hunter his basis of morality for his anti-zoophilia stance.
I'm asking you, what system of morality do you have, specifically and formally, that tells you why it shouldn't be moral?
Hunter responded by highlighting the risks of contracting diseases.
Because it's first of all, do you believe it brings negative consequences for humans? Do you believe it
can raise the risk for there are risks of diseases for humans. Okay, there are risks of diseases for humans, not even STDs necessarily. However, there are diseases that can be passed from animals to humans.
And he also pointed out that in animals totally unnecessary, since there are no real benefits.
Two, it's completely unnecessary. There is nothing that there's nothing to hold on. Stop. I'm not done yet. I know that with morals, I know that with morals, things can be neutral. I know that things do not only need to be beneficial. However, it is of an animal, of another living thing that cannot consent. Yes, something that cannot consent.
In a pathetic attempt to drive his non-existent point home, Dansburst stooped low and brought up the case of prostitution. He likened Hunter's key points to prostitution, stating that it was unnecessary and there were risks of contradicting diseases, yet humans still engage in it. He also added that consent in the human sense of prostitution should not be extended to animals.
First of all, prostitution is, there are diseases involved in prostitution. Prostitution is just as quote-unquote unnecessary. You may say that prostitution is okay because it doesn't violate your consent axiom, but the issue with the consent axiom is that, frankly, it's very inconsistent when you apply the consent axiom to animals.
Hunter easily dismantled this claim by bringing up the essence of empathy, citing that some people choose prostitution for emotional and personal reasons. This, in itself, proved that there was some level of consent involved, unlike in cases involving animals.
There's also something to be said about empathizing with why somebody would be a prostitute. Most people are not just like, hey, I want to be a prostitute today. They're usually that way because they have reached some kind of a bad place in their life.
The argument hit a tough spot for Dansburst when he started yapping about how people get into OnlyFans because it's useful to them.
Right, but what about OnlyFans people who do it because it's a good living for them? There are some of them who are pressured into it, but some other of them also do it because they find it useful to them, they are not seriously traumatized by the work, etc.
What Dansburst hadn't realized was that this particular point worked in Hunter's favor, because it revealed that people still engage in sexual acts for benefits, and animals is an unnecessary harm to everyone concerned. He was basically shooting himself in the leg by buying into his opponent's claims without realizing it, and his stupidity eventually cost him the debate when he backtracked and told Hunter that the whole prostitution thing was totally unrelated.
But I don't see how this relates to my debunking of the consent axiom.
You just brought up the prostitute thing.
Yes, I brought up the thing. So with the prostitute thing, okay, you say that the prostitute thing isn't a valid comparison because it doesn't violate the consent axiom.
It was clear that Dansburst had lost the argument long before it even started. The whole debate was full of him yapping and contradicting himself. Meanwhile, Hunter, to his credit, simply maintained the position that animals cannot consent, and that consent is necessary for ethical interactions. It shouldn't have been a difficult argument to win, but Dansburst thoroughly embarrassed himself and made Hunter look like Aristotle in the process. Hunter won decisively in the eyes of his audience, but Dansburst didn't seem to think so. Following the debate, he posted a very long thread on his YouTube page, claiming that he'd actually won, and that Hunter had failed to prove him wrong by his own logic. He just couldn't accept that maybe, just maybe, defending best was an indefensible position. This is a pattern we're going to see over and over again with Dansburst. No matter how badly he loses, how thoroughly he's debunked, or how much evidence piles up against him, he simply cannot admit that he's wrong. His ego won't allow it. Dansburst's entire identity was built around being this brave truth-teller who is willing to challenge society's taboos. Therefore, admitting that he's actually just a creepy weirdo would shatter that delusion completely. This is why he continued to plunge deeper into his pseudo-intellectual online degeneracy, moving from zoo to yet another controversial topic, zoophilia. If defending zoophilia wasn't enough to cement Dansburst's status as a degenerate, his views on children would remove all doubt. Dansburst is known as a MAP defender. For those fortunate enough to not know what this means, MAP stands for Minor Attracted Person, which is a term that was popularized by pedophiles in a desperate attempt to rebrand themselves as a misunderstood orientation. People with this orientation believe that they're different from pedophiles because they emotionally bond with children rather than act on sexual urges.
In fact, the biggest issue is not part of it, it's the emotional part of it. It's the part where, like, if I get to know a child, I fall in love with them, and then, as you can imagine, that you can't, there's nothing you can do with them.
They even tried to infiltrate LGBTQ spaces, claiming they deserved acceptance and representation just like gay and trans people. However, the members of the community rejected this immoral class. However, Dansburst wasn't amongst the vast percentage of people who rejected this group of people. He'd once claimed that he wasn't a minor attracted person himself, but that didn't stop him from being their most vocal defender. Using his platform, Dansburst made multiple posts defending MAP rights and arguing that society's treatment of pedophiles is unjust. He once got upset when people suggested pedophiles should be thrown in wood chippers, calling it ruthless, senseless violence against people with a different orientation about consent. As if that wasn't telling enough, Dansburst also defended a notorious pedophile web artist named Shadman. This is what he wrote about Shadman, defending his alleged child rape. If Shadman had a kid in real life, then sure, that's no good, but this is a nice young girl. Even if Shadman were that type of person, there is no actual risk here. Dansburst often tried to convince his viewers that he was purely defending these concepts logically, claiming that people often misunderstood this defense for support. I'm a zoo and MAP right advocate I have a logical defense of them which many find taboo, but apparently to them supporting something taboo makes you a proponent of it yourself. But isn't this exactly what defense and advocacy stands for? Does Dansburst's passion for defending a group of deranged people not count as being an avid supporter? Dansburst was claiming that these were two separate actions, but in reality they're not. Dansburst tried desperately to seem like an idle defender, but his mask fell off pretty soon the minute he started letting his hidden intentions come to light. In an interview with YouTuber Foulest on a live stream called The Op Block, Dansburst admitted that while he didn't identify as a map, he wouldn't be opposed to dating a minor.
You stated to me in DMs you would not be opposed to dating a minor. True or false?
Rare individual
True or false?
came across.
True or false? I have the DM. I'll pull it up. I'll pull it up.
Okay, sure, true.
I'll pull it up.
True.
True.
It is true.
Oh,
Now,
oh.
nothing-
When asked why he would feel comfortable doing that, he literally explained that a fraction of children possessed more maturity levels and could therefore date like normal adults.
Why would you feel comfortable dating a minor?
Because I don't believe that they're subhumans. Most of them have different interests and different maturity levels to me as individuals. But I'm not going to make a judgment about a whole group just based off of the average or even the 99% of that group. I'm not a judgmental person in that way. I judge based off of the individual and not based off of in-groups.
At this point, it was clear that this Brony was a and a map supporter through and through. Dansburst never missed a chance to back up his community with his nonsensical arguments. He tried to level the playing field by claiming that pedophilia is the same as being gay, but Foulest quickly and rightfully dismissed this false concept.
Let's talk about this right now. It's not the same thing as being gay. We can agree with that.
You believe that pedophilia cannot be a sexuality. You believe that it cannot be innate.
If you want me to be very real, pedophilia is not a sexuality. It is quite.
I believe it can be.
That's okay. Then
there exist individuals for which it is a sex.
Despite losing this argument, Dansburst's gospel of pedophilia was far from over. In yet another interview with a Kiwi farmer known as Fake Null Davy, Dansburst claimed that a 5-year-old can consent to.
I believe it's severely and very improbable that a 5-year-old is going to give their free expression of indication of desire in regarding act.
And as if that wasn't revolting enough, the Brony also brought forth the idea that exceptional or mature minors were being by age of consent laws that prevented them from dating adults.
I think that because people are individuals, there exists at least one minor who is mature enough to make that decision. And so when you implement a law that says all minors cannot date people over a certain age, you are favoring the 99% and excluding the 1% who is mature enough. And that is a decision that goes against the individual in favor of the average. It's implemented on everyone. And I disagree with that decision because I don't believe that the state should be making decisions preemptively in favor of the average at the detriment of the extremes.
These are the words of someone who'd been claiming to only advocate for the rights of the pedophilic and zoo minority. Arguing for the revisions of consent laws was his best move, and Dansburst believed in his heart that he was fighting a good cause. The debates were one thing, but the actions that followed were a whole new ballgame. Dansburst actively defended pedophilia online. One time, he reacted to a post about trans pedophiles on Twitter and quickly hopped in their defense. Let's take a look at some of the things he wrote. The modern moralist herd won't stop until all publicly out maps are shamed and stampeded off the internet. They're also going after defenders as well, that is, any pony who doesn't align ideologically with their fallacious ageism. That's right, Dansburst called opposition to pedophilia ageism, as if not wanting adults children is somehow equivalent to discriminating against someone based on how old they are. The false equivalence is genuinely staggering. In the same thread, Dansburst also tried to redefine he believed that the word was used wrongly to give minor attracted persons a wrong name. These people say the minor was doing what? Being platonic friends. This buzzword's used so often, it loses its meaning and gets watered down to acted somewhat creepily, like gaslighting being watered down into disagreeing/lying to me. This is such predatory rhetoric, a poor and desperate attempt to justify animal abuse. Dansburst was trying to redefine a manipulative pattern of exploiting children, saying that it wasn't as grave a definition as people thought it was. This sounds like a surefire move a predator would make, trying to minimize controversial terms to make their behavior seem innocent. Dansburst was on a self-ordained mission to defend and anyone who countered him was labeled a fake progressive or a conformist. Dansburst believed that you had to challenge every societal norm to be a proper progressive, even if it was pedophilia and zoo. And here's where things became a lot more crazier. Dansburst's defense moved from disgusting to next-level lunacy when his argument became centered around the cartoon character, Sonic the Hedgehog, and what has to be one of the most accidentally hilarious moments in this whole saga. Someone on Twitter posted an image of Sonic the Hedgehog with the caption, stating that all pedophiles should be beaten to death. And guess what? Dansburst absolutely lost his mind over this. He accused the person of perverting his childhood with a political agenda. I don't even have any words for this. You're perverting one of my childhood and current icons to serve as a mouthpiece for your political agenda. You. In that same spirit of anger, he stated that Sonic would never ever support those kinds of politics, and that this must be Metal Sonic impersonating him. This is Metal Sonic masquerading as Sonic. When someone makes an image like that, they're making Sonic into a political mouthpiece. Dansburst was genuinely upset that someone would dare to suggest that Sonic the Hedgehog doesn't support pedophile rights. The irony here is that Dansburst clearly isn't even a real Sonic fan, because anyone who watched The Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog would know that Sonic literally issues a warning to kids about reporting anyone who touches their bodies inappropriately.
Kids, there's nothing more cool than being hugged by someone you like. But if someone tries to touch you in a place or in a way that makes you feel uncomfortable, that's no good. It's your body. No one has the right to touch you if you don't want them to. So what do? First, you say no. Then, you get out of there. Most important, you gotta tell someone you trust. Like your parents, your teacher, a police...
This proves that Sonic is explicitly anti-pedophile and would definitely not defend Dansburst the same way he'd just done because of a little poster. So far, Dansburst has continued to crash and burn in his sick agenda. First, he tried to set himself apart on it like he was an advocate for the minority who was only observing from the outside. But with that same mouth of his, he still managed to out himself as a pedophile. This show of character reveals just how sick in the head he truly is. And this wasn't even the most disgusting part yet. You see, Dansburst wasn't just defending the abstract concept of maps. He was actively using language and terminology that revealed his own predatory mindset. He often referred to children as foals, a term used to describe baby horses. This reasoning can be interpreted as a deliberate linguistic choice that allows him to discuss children in a context while maintaining plausible deniability. In one Twitter exchange, someone posted My Little Pony fan art, and Dansburst responded, "What kind of a reply is that? Did you type it with one hand? I don't understand why you think you can do anything about my full harem. Equestria doesn't have the same draconian age of consent laws in this dimension's human world. You'd know if you portaled there like I have." Let's unpack this horrifying statement. Dansburst is claiming to have a full harem, that is, a harem of children. He's stating that in Equestria, the fictional world of My Little Pony, there are no age of consent laws, and he's claiming that he has traveled there through portals, which could mean that in his delusional mind, he's actually acted on these fantasies. Now, is Dansburst literally claiming to have traveled to a cartoon dimension and had with cartoon children? Probably not, because even he knows that's insane. But what he's doing is using this fictional framework to express his real desires while maintaining a layer of "it's just roleplay" as protection. Dansburst's unsettling pattern of public behavior extended to his Discord server, Planet Kitten Island, where he created what he called a safe space free from tyrannical censorship. In reality, this meant allowing self-identified maps to interact freely with minors under his non-aggression principle policy. Dansburst believed he was providing a safe zone for when he was essentially feeding them to the minors on the platform. The evidence was mounting, the controversies were escalating, and Dansburst's carefully constructed facade of being an intellectual defender of the marginalized was taking a big blow to the gut. What started as a bizarre pony roleplay had evolved into something far more sinister, and the internet was watching, archiving, and preparing to bring it all crashing down. With more publicity came curiosity. Who exactly was Herbert Kenneth Wachaka, and what kind of background produces someone as vile as him? That's where our story takes an even darker turn, because everything we've covered so far, the zoophilia video, the advocacy, the victim blaming, the dehumanizing language, that was just the foundation. The real horror was still to come. Herbert Kenneth Wachaka, better known as Timothy or just Dansburst to those unfortunate enough to know him, is somehow even worse than what we've come to know him to be. He was born on January 11, 2005 to Herbert Cipriano Wachaka and Gladys Maribel Flores in Mecklenburg, North Carolina. His parents had immigrated to the United States from Peru, presumably hoping for a better life for their children. Dansburst has multiple sisters, and by all accounts his early life seemed normal and even promising. Dansburst attended JFK School in Patterson for middle school, where he was apparently the top reader. He wasn't just a good reader, he set a new world record for being the top reader. For high school, he went to Clifton High School, and this is where things get interesting. Dansburst had a strong academic prowess. He was a math prodigy who amassed the highest score in math league contests. He also participated in track and field events. There's video footage of him running in the junior varsity boys 5K.
There you go.
Dansburst was truly a stellar kid with a flair for competition. After graduating high school, he attended Rutgers University, where he majored in physics. There, he participated in competitive coding competitions in 2024, and even named his competitive coding team Code Horses, which was a sign of his pony addiction amidst his intelligence. Dansburst's earliest known online activity can be traced back to December 2015, when he was about 10 years old, making custom Pokemon cards of Donald Trump and Barack Obama. It was quirky, sure, but was relatively for a kid to do. So what happened? How did this promising young student with a bright future turn into someone who took pride in making low-quality YouTube videos defending the indefensible? Despite all these successes, Dansburst became an unemployed bum who was living with his mother somewhere in New Jersey. This former physics genius became what the internet calls a NEET, which is translation for a person who is. Not an education, an employment, or training. And the crazy part is that Dansburst is proud of his status as a NEET. The only bummer for him is not that he's unemployed, it's that he barely has privacy while leeching off his mother. For Dansburst, not being able to conveniently create his deranged content is far worse than being a NEET in 2024. In one of his tweets, he likened his lack of privacy to a Friday Night at Freddy's experience, FNAF. Hoofing off as a grown NEET is FNAF, 4 family member animatronics, 2 entrances to the room on both sides, and worst of all, my security cameras get disabled when the internet slows. How am I ever going to make it to 6 a.m.? This is the major concern of someone who had the credentials to grow into a responsible member of society. His inability to argue about and under his mother's roof is a factor worth admitting to online. It's unclear why Dansburst was shamelessly embarrassing himself in such a manner, or why he never followed the clean academic future he'd created for himself. A huge chunk of the reason for this is his My Little Pony obsession. We have one image of him with his father on a My Little Pony ride from 2009. Well, it turns out that his childhood fantasy became too much of a devotion for his brain to bear, and maybe his autism had something to do with his... Regardless, these are not true reasons for someone to argue about moral and social norms. Dansburst was prideful. He had this unshakable belief that he was an intellectual titan while everyone else was beneath him. This superiority complex made it extremely difficult for him to maintain intimate relationships in his life. A close example was his transgender ex-girlfriend named Michael or Alyssa Rogers. Through their relationship, we get to see how dysfunctional Dansburst is in real life, not just online. Michael Goldstein Rogers, whose chosen name is Elisa Michelle Goldstein, is an autistic transgender, known mainly by his online handle Furry Gamers Against Trump. Like Dansburst, Michael also claims to have high-functioning autism, and he's also a jolly good friend of minor attracted persons who clamors for the end of the age of consent. Michael is just the same as Dansburst, only that he owns up to his public side than Dansburst, but that's not the only disturbing detail about the pair. There are unconfirmed speculations that Dansburst might have been by Michael, who's almost 10 years older than him. Dansburst had once claimed that he's known Michael for years, and he'd funded his transition. If that's the case, then it could mean that Michael had met Dansburst when he was possibly still in high school. Whatever the case may be, the two of them stood out as very awkward and deranged people of society. Their relationship eventually blew up on the internet thanks to a now-deleted video from Michael's YouTube channel. The video, titled Me and My Boyfriend Fighting, was uploaded without Dansburst's knowledge, and captured the two of them having an absolutely unhinged argument. And guess what they were fighting about? A stolen Snickers bar.
Oh, where did you put my Snickers bar?
Wait, what are you saying, Timmy?
Michael, you took my Snickers bar! You think I didn't see you think I don't see the fucking shit you do every day after Halloween?
The more you listen to them, the more you'd think it's a joke. Dansburst started accusing Michael of not working to earn the Snicker bar since he was on disability, and Michael responded by claiming that he deserved to be on disability because he had a high-functioning autism. Dansburst soon devolved into a screaming mess, saying that he would break up with Michael and himself.
This is why I'm never gonna be with you again. I'm gonna break up with you and you're never gonna see me again. I'm gonna so Michael, and you will be the one you will pay.
The video eventually ends with a lot of shouting, cursing, and thrashing sounds, and you can tell it's a deranged fest going on. This is the kind of relationship that should have ended immediately, but instead, it dragged on, with both parties exposing their pathetic selves online. Dansburst commented on the video on Michael's channel, saying that it showed the telltale signs of an abusive relationship. Then in yet another poorly constructed writing, he said, "When a relationship is about love, open your heart and be loving, not hateful like the Republicans we both despise." Dansburst had just threatened to commit suicide over candy, only to show up on the internet, preaching love. The pair eventually broke up, with Michael updating the world through his YouTube channel. "He is my ex now. I do not love you anymore. It is over." It might be safe to say that the end of their relationship was a good thing. Two heads are better than one. However, in Michael and Dansburst's case, 2 of their heads weren't even up to 1. It's clear that Dansburst's mental strength was weak, despite the well of knowledge he possessed in high school and college. He was obsessed with the kids' show My Little Pony, and had built his entire personality around Dansburst, which is based on the character Sunburst. He shifted this obsession to his YouTube channel, and this was where everything went out of control for him. Dansburst created this channel sometime in 2021 under the name Bruh. Then around early 2023, he rebranded it into Dansburst Studio. His channel's main series was Dansburst Debunks, where he attempted to debunk what he called misconceptions about taboo topics. The arguments on zoophilia already offer a glimpse of the nature of the videos he posted on his channel. By setting up his account and recording controversial debates, Dansburst practically drew attention to himself, and this attention came from the one and only forum dedicated to exposing internet lolcows like himself, Kiwi Farms. Now, most people who end up on Kiwi Farms try to ignore it. They go dark. They delete their accounts or try to move on with their lives. However, not Dansburst. Instead of helping his case by staying quiet, Dansburst decided to actively engage with the website dedicated to documenting and mocking him. The original Kiwi Farms thread that was designed for Dansburst wasn't even about him in the first place. It was a mass debate thread that was created as a containment thread for a user called Foster U. Foster U, whose real name is Fabian Guerrero, was a Mexican Brony who was also Dansburst's friend. He was added to the easy-to-track username Hall of Shame on Kiwi due to his unusual love for ponies, his desire to play the game, amongst many other controversial intrigues. Dansburst joined Kiwi Farms on July 26, 2024, and quickly went on the defensive about his content. He stated that his style isn't for everyone, and Kiwi farmers were basically defacing his videos in a way that he never liked at all. Then he added that everyone was focused on feelings rather than facts, and this was why they were Trump supporters. Sure, I'm shouting and screaming a lot, but I'm also making an actual logical argument that you guys don't care to listen to. You guys only care about quick sound bites, feeling over facts. That's why you find Trump so with his statistically devoid, witty one-liners. This was Dansburst's epic introduction into the forum. He spent his good time defending his fellow deranged bronies, who also possessed similar beliefs on zoophilia and the age of consent. Among these people was his avid supporter and friend, Peppermint Swirl, also known as William Thorncannon, is another brony who once hyped Dansburst's zoophilia video in the comments. At this point, Dansburst had already made it crystal clear who his circle of friends were. They banded together and even made a video on Foster U's YouTube channel, a video they titled Antifa Party, who egg crust. By virtue of his ties to this union, Dansburst soon found himself in hot water in the Kiwi Farms community. They created his own thread, where Dansburst himself proceeded to argue with anyone and everyone who would engage with him. He would attempt to justify every single accusation, piece of evidence, and every screenshot. He couldn't help himself. It was around this time that he uploaded his argument on his YouTube channel, and not only did it leave it at that, Dansburst also made a public announcement on the forum, telling everyone to watch it. To all haters and mistaken fans who thought I had turned tail and ran, just because of some mean comments, put a hoof in your mouth and suck it. He also threw a foreshadowing of an upcoming video project he called the Kiwi Farms Exposal, where he intended to shame the forum for insulting his like-minded people. Dansburst was on a self-ordained mission to help his community. He eventually released a video titled Kiwi Farms is Lying About Me. In the video, Dansburst basically debunked everything that had been written on the thread, and insinuated that the members of the forum were jobless for creating the long thread in the first place.
First of all, how pathetic it is that they've spent 14 entire pages chronicling me, just a small part-time YouTuber who hasn't even gone full-time yet, just because they think that my quote-unquote behavior is quote-unquote so abnormal, they say.
The video was laughable, but it didn't change anything. The thread still remains to this day, and it's even more comprehensive than it was at the point of Dansburst making his video. The day eventually came when Dansburst lost his voice on the platform. You may be wondering how this happened? Well, Dansburst got banned from Kiwi Farms. This was a website notorious for having essentially no rules and allowing pretty much anything to be discussed. But Dansburst was banned on August 14th, 2024, less than 3 weeks after joining for being a pedophile. On that same day, Dansburst tweeted about it saying, "Just today I was banned on the KF for some reason. Was it my Sonic tweet? Being a gay rights supporter doesn't make you gay. Same for MAP rights." As usual, his words were as tone-deaf and irritating as ever. Instead of taking this unprecedented ban as a reason to self-reflect, he threw himself a pity party and tried comparing his support for MAP rights to his support for gay rights. Kiwi Farms was only one case. Thanks to the same controversial behavior, Dansburst was banned from another secure website known as Ponytown. Ponytown is a video game where My Little Pony fans create pony characters, build houses, and socialize. It's generally considered a pretty wholesome space for fans of the show. But as usual, Dansburst polluted it by admitting that he tried to befriend foals, which is his term for children. And it only got worse afterwards. In Discord messages, Dansburst discussed how he was into virtual and called Ponytown his hunting grounds. Someone had commented that they didn't have the mental or physical strength to someone, to which Dansburst responded, "Start virtually. Virtual play games that stimulate the experience. A game of ponies building a town. These were my first hunting grounds." The Ponytown community quickly caught on that Dansburst was a threat to their free space, so he was banned before he knew it. As usual, the Brony didn't take this reception lightly. He took to his Twitter and called everyone involved in his downfall pro-shippers to bigotry. This mass cancellation on websites that allow extensive freedom revealed just how impossible it was for Dansburst to be an accommodating person. He didn't do well in school, relationships, and even family. And now, his own online community threw him to wolves. Even the wolves in Kiwi Farms didn't want him. He was a discarded specimen in all corners except his own social media accounts. However, his safe spaces wouldn't hold up for long because the next Dansburst exposure would ruin him for life. This exposure began through his leaked discussions on Discord. It was on the platform that he'd recommended My Little Pony to someone for virtual, and it was still on this same Discord that evidence of him potentially 14-year-old emerged. The girl's name was Sarah, and she'd once claimed to be 14 years old. Her case only raised questions when Dansburst entered the scene. In one chat room, Sarah claimed that she was going to run away from home to Dansburst's house and her parents wouldn't know about it. And Dansburst gladly accepted, calling it a playdate. There were speculations that Sarah might have been in her 20s, but that's besides the point. The point is, Dansburst was open to the idea of welcoming a runaway minor. This just proved how horrible and irresponsible he truly was as a person. Eventually, he met his complete downfall when the members of Kiwi Farms made contact with his supposed girlfriend named Madeline Ringer. Madeline, who was also known online as Aimu_Fuso, had grown tired of Dansburst's obsession with her and was also disturbed by his principles, so she handed over everything she had on him, including screenshots of their Discord messages and Dansburst's real pictures. It's from this point that the doxing began. Everything we've discussed concerning Herbert Huachaka till this point was a product of the information Kiwi Farms gained. Within days, Dansburst's entire life was laid bare, from his birth date to his academic achievements. With his information now made public, Dansburst had no choice but to run away. On December 16, 2024, every single Dansburst Studios account vanished. YouTube, Twitter, Discord, all were deleted within hours of the docs going public. His friends attempted desperate damage control. Foster U raged against Madeline on Discord, calling her a traitor for exposing Dansburst. Some dumb called him Ufuso doxed Dansburst because some also dumb whore from college asked her to. This attack would inadvertently confirm that Herbert was truly Dansburst. Now that the world could finally place a face to the crackhead who advocated for there was no hiding place for Dansburst anymore, so he banished himself into obscurity and left a happy and content internet community in his wake. Now the world has been spared one more degenerate who loved arguing about dogs while using condoms. As of the time of making this video, Dansburst has not returned to the internet. There are no new accounts, no statements, and no attempts to salvage his reputation. The man who claimed to have had good operational security had simply ceased to exist online. The internet can only wait and wonder if this is the end for him. And if he does return, will he be as childish and degenerate as he once was?